So it's that time again, time to crown my losers of the week, and as always, this was a tough decision. But let's talk about schools, shall we? We know Democrats take their cues from the almighty teachers' unions, but apparently Arizona's leading Democrat and governor, Katie Hobbs, also takes the porn industry into consideration, given she just vetoed a bill that would have banned pornography filmmaking in taxpayer-funded buildings, including K-12 classrooms in public schools. I guess Katie Hobbs has her own interpretation of school choice, and it's a hell of a lot different than mine. To give a little more of the backstory here, two Mojave County teachers were fired after they filmed pornographic material in one of their very own classrooms and then proceeded to post it online for the whole world to see. This led to a bill introduced by State Senator Jake Hoffman that would have prevented this kind of thing from happening in the future, making it a Class 5 felony. But Katie Hobbs, yeah, she vetoed it. On what grounds, I'm not sure, but she's a loser, and this is just another example of why. But she's not the only Democrat leader with poor decision-making and priorities. Up next is Mayor Eric Adams, who runs the proud sanctuary city of New York City straight into the ground. As we know, he's all flustered by the busloads of illegals his city has been receiving over the last several months, a small amount in comparison to what the overrun border cities and states have had to put up with. But nevertheless, he is scrambling to figure out what to do with all these illegals. Apparently, the upscale hotel rooms taxpayers have been footing the bill for are getting pretty pricey, especially after these illegals trash them. So Mayor Adams has come up with a new plan. Set them up in some spare bedrooms of his constituents, voluntarily, of course. Oh boy, what could go wrong? You know, I'm sure these illegals wouldn't set up sex and drug dens in people's homes. They only do that kind of thing in hotels, I'm sure. But you know what? I don't hate this idea, and I can think of a few ladies who likely have some spare room in their lavish dwellings. Sounds like an inspired idea to me, so enjoy, Joy. But speaking of witches, my last losers of the week, well, they're also really something. Feast your eyes on that, folks. And no, that is not a behind-the-scenes shot of craft services over at The View. Rather, those are two witches caught on security camera footage in British Columbia, apparently munching on a deer carcass in someone's backyard area. Now listen, I do not know, nor do I proclaim to know, the political affiliation of said witches, but I will say this, I would bet my ass they are not conservatives. I'm just gonna leave you guys to marinate on that one.
When she was like, are you going to let them have professional football? And I was really like, nope. And she's like, okay, neither are we. You know, it was like conversations like that.
Oh, that was Biden's pick for new CDC Director Mandy Cohen reminiscing about COVID restrictions, job crushing, economy killing, mental health damaging, and useless COVID restrictions. She apparently got a real kick out of it, but she's not the only one. All these COVID tyrants, from Fauci to blue state tyrant governors and mayors to mask-happy flight attendants, they all got some kind of a sick kick out of ruining lives and businesses for years with their mandates. But you know what? As painful as it is to look back on that horrible, stupid, idiotic time in our nation's history, we have to. Why? Because if we give them COVID amnesty, so to speak, they have no reason not to do it again. Next time, maybe it'll be a climate emergency or an LGBTQ emergency. Who knows? But let's not find out. And what about their beloved vaccines? Well, it turns out as of last month, only 1 in 5 U.S. adults had gotten their boosters. That's only about 20%, but given everything we know now about these shots, should that 20% be afraid of glowing in the dark here sometime soon? Joining me now with the facts is cardiologist, epidemiologist, and author of Courage to Face COVID-19, Dr. Peter McCullough. Dr. McCullough, you know, we haven't had enough discussion about COVID in the last several months, and I think that's because there's a certain cohort of people that really want that whole time to just go away, but we're not going to let them do it.
It's true. We have to hold people accountable. If we don't learn the mistakes of pandemic response, it's just going to be another disaster in the future.
So I want to talk about the vaccine because, again, that's something that the left was so excited to talk about last year. We know last winter, our president declared it a deadly winter for those who chose not to get vaccinated. But now I don't really hear them talking so much about the COVID shots and the boosters. It seems like that's kind of gone away a little bit. But my concern is for a lot of Americans that either voluntarily or were all but forced to get the vaccine to keep their employment or what have you, I'm afraid for what they may be experiencing. So I want to get into this. We've had a little bit of transparency now about some of the side effects of this vaccine, but what have you noticed? What are you seeing? And what does the public need to know about maybe the long-term implications of that experimental mRNA vaccine?
I was concerned by a report by Lee and colleagues, huge study, hundreds of thousands of people who took the shot in 2021 compared to those who didn't. And 2 years later, there was an increased risk of micro blood clots seen in the retinal arteries and retinal veins, seen in the eyes, meaning the blood clots are systemically circulating. So this is worrisome. It means 2 shots back in 2021, the blood is still hypercoagulable. People are still at risk for blood clots. In my clinical practice, I've seen record numbers of cases of myocarditis, stroke, blood clots, and other immunologic problems. So people need to stay aware. They clearly need to stop taking any more shots. On December 7th, 2022, I called for, on the floor of the U.S. Senate, for all the vaccines to be pulled off the market. Since that time, the original Pfizer and Moderna and now Janssen vaccines are pulled off the market, but we still have Pfizer, Moderna, bivalent vaccines and the Novavax, on the market. Very few people are taking them, but the threat needs to be removed. All the mandates need to be dropped, and people need to stay far away from these vaccines.
So for those that have already gotten the vaccine, maybe have already gotten a couple of boosters, if they haven't experienced any noticeable side effects to this point, are they in the clear, or could this possibly rear its head on down the road and maybe the side effects are coming?
It really depends on the batch of vaccine that they got. An important paper by Schmeling and colleagues published from Denmark identified 3 separate batch groups. The first batch, about a third of people, no side effects at all, 0. Looks like nothing happens. The second group, which is comprised of about 2/3 of people, there's some moderate side effects, but nothing serious. And then there's a final group of batches, about 4.2% of all doses, where the risk is through the roof. Blood clots, heart damage, neurologic damage, immediate death. So it depends on the batch, and there are websites, check my batch and others to see the lot numbers to see what the risks are. We do think that people have extended risk over time if they've had the high risk, vials. And we don't know if it's hyper-concentrated messenger RNA or contamination for what's called cDNA plasmids or other contaminants, but it was a product problem. Senator Johnson sent a notice to the CDC well over a year ago saying we have a product problem with the lots, and the CDC essentially blew him off. Now we have the Schmeling data, which is compelling. There was a problem with the product production of the vaccines.
So there's been a few headlines here and there about a very notable actor and musician, Jamie Foxx, who is still, to my knowledge, hospitalized, possibly even blind now. And we don't know what from, but there's been a lot of speculation that it was vaccine related, given that he maybe had to get this vaccine to work on the movie that he was shooting at the time. Have you heard anything about this? And do his symptoms, his side effects, do those track with what we've seen from vaccine side effects?
I don't have any direct knowledge of what happened to Foxx. I had a chance to talk to him, though, in 2021, and we took pictures and he asked some questions, a private conversation, but suffice it to say, he understood the risks at that time. What Hollywood reporter A.J. Benz is saying is that people close to him, that he was actually essentially forced to take the shot prior to his shooting his most recent movie in Atlanta, and that he suffered a form of a stroke, either an ischemic stroke or a hemorrhagic stroke, and as a result had significant neurologic injuries. Now, a few clips have emerged where he is able to talk or put together some words, and his voice has clearly changed. Now, I can tell you, he's younger than I am. He's very fit and strong. He's a wonderful talent, doesn't have much in the way of a family, has a daughter. I'm happy to go on with him or his family or his doctors and explain to America what happens. He, along with other public figures, have a responsibility to warn others. If they've been damaged by these vaccines, they need to warn others to stop this chain of continued vaccine injuries, disabilities, and deaths.
I hope that we're getting to that point now, because even 6 months to a year ago, most public figures and celebrities were cheerleading the vaccine, doing promos for the vaccine. And even if some had some reticence personally, they certainly didn't let that show. And if they did, they were ridiculed publicly for it. I remember specifically rapper Nicki Minaj talking about possible vaccine side effects, and she was absolutely dragged for that. So I hope we're reaching a time now where people can be a little bit more honest. Another kind of conspiracy theory I want to get your take on is there's been a lot of folks that have also been very concerned that are not vaccinated, never were vaccinated, but they are concerned about vaccine shedding. Is that a possibility with this type of an mRNA vaccine? Could those that are vaccinated possibly shed any type of anything on those of us who are unvaccinated and cause us any reason for concern?
Shedding is possible with the lipid nanoparticles in the messenger RNA, for sure in the first month after a vaccine. We've told people taking the vaccine they shouldn't donate blood or have close contact with others. And I used to say 30 days. I've extended it out to 90 days. It's certainly possible. Virtually all of us have been exposed to the spike protein now. The seropositive data from multiple data sets show we've all been exposed. So we're not worried about spike exposure, but 25% of Americans held strong. They didn't take the vaccine. They made the right choice. They don't want to get the vaccine passively from someone else. It's never been proven in scientific studies. Let's hope it's not happening.
Yeah, I certainly hope so as well. I mean, if it already has happened, I mean, I think we're all, again, we've all been exposed to it in some way, shape, or form. Last thing I want to ask you about, there have been some reports that have come up recently about the early days of COVID, and perhaps not COVID itself killing people, but the fact that they were put on ventilators possibly being the reason that some of these people died. What can you tell us about that, and what do you think went down there?
Now, I've published extensively on early treatment of COVID, and we learned to use oxygen at home and tolerate the hypoxemia or low oxygen saturations at home, provided mentation was fine and they had good, care support at home. We didn't need to have people in the hospital or let alone go on mechanical ventilators. Now we learned in a study that many patients, in fact, got secondary pneumonias since the ventilator doesn't allow normal clearance of secretion. So ventilation in COVID has been a disaster. It should be avoided at all costs. We should have always treated patients at home early. The sequence multi-drugs, we use about 4 to 6 drugs. The monoclonal antibodies were wonderful. Everybody should have had a shot at those in the ER before they were hospitalized. It was a tragedy that only those denied early treatment ended up in the hospital or died.
Right. What a stupid time in American history. I hope that we all learned our lesson. May we never be as stupid as a collective to ever allow them to do this to us again. I mean, it's going to be really irreparable for generations of Americans who had learning loss, mental health struggles, that their businesses closed, and that's not even taking into consideration the vaccine and those side effects. Doctor, thank you for always being so honest and forthright with everybody about what you know. You've been a guiding light in this for so many. We know that the COVID era might be over, but there's still a lot to worry about. So we certainly appreciate you always being transparent with us.
Thank you for having me.